Here are some of the most wanted people in human history. Number 1, Gilles de Rais. Born in 1404, Gilles de Rais was a knight and lord in France. He is remembered for being a comrade in arms of Joan of Arc, with whom he fought alongside during the 100 Years' War. They were also together during the pivotal Siege of Orleans and several other key battles. This would eventually lead him to being appointed Marshal of France, the highest military distinction in the country. This brought him immense wealth, territory, and prestige. However, his military career dwindled down following Joan of Arc's death. He spent his money recklessly, outfitting his estate with lavish decorations and works of art.
Gilles, how many more decorative snow globes do you need? All of them, until there is no more snow in Aspen. Now, where is my collection of comic books? Here, my lord. Ah, good. I was waiting for this. I want to know what Monsieur Archie and Monsieur Jughead are up to. Sign here, please? Oh, yes. Say, aren't you a little old to be summoning demons? No, I'm not.
During this time, Gilles began dabbling in the occults. He came in contact with an Italian cleric named Francois Prelati, who claimed he could summon demons. Gilles, struggling with his finances, perhaps sought the powers of hell to reclaim his lost fortune or prestige. Prelati claimed he could summon a demon named Baron, but the repeated rituals, which involved offering parts of children, failed. Gilles' finances continued to drain. At the same time, Gilles began kidnapping, murdering, and torturing adolescents. Their parents were aware that their kids were going missing around Gilles' castle, but they were too scared to come forward and confront him. Ironically, it wasn't trying to summon demons or torturing adolescents that got Gilles arrested. Due to an unrelated dispute, Gilles kidnapped a local priest and seized a castle. An investigation was launched into Gilles' territory and found several rumors of his dealing with devils and the kidnapping of missing children. Their findings would lead to Gilles' arrest. He was put on trial for several crimes, including heresy, sodomy, and the taking of lives of over 100 young adolescents. After confessing to his sins, Gilles was executed by being hanged and burned alive alongside his co-conspirators. Number 2, Peter Stumpp. In the early 1500s, Peter Stumpp was a wealthy German farmer who had strong ties to his community. He had 2 children, 1 daughter and 1 son. His wife passed away due to causes unknown. Most details about his life are based on pamphlets made during his trial and subsequent execution. The local community accused Peter of being a werewolf in disguise, and after being tortured on a rack, he confessed to his crimes. Peter admitted to practicing black magic since he was 12 years old, but his most grievous sin of all was dealings with the devil. He claimed that he was given a magical belt that allowed him to turn into a werewolf, which, upon its removal, would turn him back into a man. He prowled the villages for over 25 years, devouring goats, lambs, sheep, and other livestock. However, he also confessed to taking the lives of at least 14 children and 2 pregnant women. Of the 14 children he devoured, 1 of them was his son.
Peter, for your various heinous crimes, including collaborating with the devil, eating women and children, unpaid parking tickets, and huffing and puffing down 1 straw house and 1 stick house, you are hereby sentenced to... Jesus. We actually do this?
Peter's punishment was severe and one of the most gruesome executions during the Great Werewolf Scare in Germany. Peter was tied to a large wheel, whereupon various executioners would hack away at his limbs one by one. He was then beheaded and set alight on a pyre. His daughter and mistress were not spared. They were flayed, strangled, and burned alongside Peter. As a warning against future would-be werewolves, the local authorities displayed Peter's severed head next to a werewolf figure. Number 3, Ishikawa Goemon. Little is known about Ishikawa Goemon's origins. Many early accounts agree that he was just a common thief, but as his notoriety grew, so did the legends and tales attributed to him. One of the most agreed upon origins is that Goemon was born to a samurai family in the Iga province. When his father was slain by the Ishikaga shogunate, he swore vengeance upon them. Like any normal 15-year-old, he started training in the ninjutsu under a man named Momochi. After Goemon was caught having an affair with Momochi's mistress, he stole one of Momochi's prized swords and escaped. Goemon fled to the Kansai region, where he gathered several bandits and thieves and began marauding across the countryside. He stole from rich local lords, merchants, and priests, but shared his loot with the peasants. Because of this, many consider Goemon as the Japanese Robin Hood.
Go ahead, take what you deserve. I take from the rich, and I give to the poor. I cannot believe this. I'm rich. Say that again. I'm rich? You just had to open that damn mouth.
Goemon was caught following a failed assassination attempt on the shogun Toyotomi Hideyoshi at Fushimi Castle. The accounts of why he did this and how he was caught differ. In one case, Goemon wanted to kill Hideyoshi for political reasons, as Goemon held him responsible for his wife's death. In this version, he was caught after accidentally knocking a bell from a table, which alerted the guards. In another case, Goemon was caught by magical incense, which alerted guards to his presence. Either way, it seems like Goemon's ninjutsu training didn't pay off. Goemon was apprehended and executed in perhaps the most metal way possible. He was brought to the main gate of Nanzenji. Here, he was boiled alive in a cauldron and was forced to lift his infant son over his head. Goemon endured the scalding heat of the pot and kept his arms raised above him to keep his son safe. When Goemon died, nearby onlookers saved his son. Goemon's legacy is preserved in plays, portrayals in mass media, and in characters based on his legends and feats. Number 4, Zheng Yi Sao. Zheng Yi was a pirate chief who commanded a fleet of ships collectively known as the Red Flag Fleet, the largest of 6 other fleets under his command. He was immensely successful, capturing valuable cargo such as gold, silk, and spices along the South China Sea. However, he was killed either in action or in a typhoon in November of 1807, whereupon the various captains of his fleet elected his wife, Zheng Yi Sao, into power. When she assumed leadership of the Red Flag Fleet, Zheng Yi Sao's men numbered perhaps 70,000. She and her men plundered with impunity, capturing cargo and torturing sailors who offended them. In one instance, Zheng Yi Sao took a liking to Richard Glasspool, a British officer and skilled gunner. She took him into his fleet and he became one of her favorites. She also implemented a strict code for her crew to follow. They were expected to religiously record any goods they plundered and were forbidden from abusing or hurting any women and from landing on shore without leave.
Hi, yeah. I want to take leave on the 12th. What's the reason? It's my son's birthday, and I want to surprise him. It says here you're out of leaves. If you take one now, it'll be without pay. Ah, come on. It wasn't my fault I had an opium addiction. Let's take it up with the madam. Zheng Yi Sao? Yeah. I'll allow it. Happy birthday to your kid. Thank you, Zheng Yi Sao.
Zheng Yi Sao frequently fought with many of the global maritime powers of that era, including the British East India Company, the Portuguese, and even their own Qing Empire. Such was her influence that she seemed truly impossible. The officials at Guangdong were desperate for an end to her influence, as their waters were frequented by Zheng Yi Sao and her fleet. She frequently fought off Qing imperial ships, and she broke through the Portuguese blockade at Tongcheng Bay. Eventually, 2 main factors drove Zheng Yi Sao to surrender. First, her fleet had become so big that they had great sway in negotiating surrender terms. Second, her fleet had also become so big that it had become more difficult to ensure cohesion and loyalty. Ku Po Tai, her commander of the 100-strong Black Flag Fleet, refused to aid her during a battle against Imperial Chinese and Portuguese ships at Lantau. Zheng Yi Sao thus decided to surrender. She sailed 260 of her ships into the Canton harbor, walked up to local authorities, and demanded a complete pardon for all her acts of piracy. The Guangdong government, eager to finally see an end to the feared scourge of the South China Sea, complied. She and her crew were permitted to keep whatever riches they had, but they were told to surrender most of their weapons and ships. Chang Pao, Zheng Yi Sao's right-hand man, even became a navy captain. Zheng Yi Sao and Chang Pao eventually married and settled down. She ran a gambling house and smuggling ring until her peaceful death in 1844. She was 69. Nice. Number 5. Spartacus. Born in 103 BC, Spartacus was a Thracian who served as a soldier in the Roman army. After he deserted its ranks, he was captured and became a gladiator. In the year 73 BC, Spartacus and about 70 other slave gladiators took up arms and escaped. They seized kitchen utensils, weapons, and other pieces of gladiator equipment and fought their way out, defeating any soldiers sent after them. They gathered other runaway slaves who made Spartacus and 2 other gladiator slaves, Chrysis and Onomos, their leaders. They took refuge in Mount Vesuvius, an easily defensible position from which to harass and raid the Roman countryside. The Romans initially thought very little of Spartacus's rebellion, seeing it as nothing more than a trifling matter.
Sir, a man called Spartacus and a great number of slaves have escaped and are holed up in Mount Vesuvius. What should we do? How bad could it be? We have our hands full right now in Hispania with Pontus. Just send the militia and have them surround the mountain. Of course. Very good, sir. So, do we have an update on this Spartacus fellow? Unfortunately, sir, they defeated our first legion hard and slaughtered the militia. Now what? What? What about the second army we sent? We're still waiting for confirmation on that, sir. Let me put on the television. Sir, they hit the second legion.
Spartacus and the slaves he had trained inflicted several defeats on the Roman army, which was very alarming to the Senate. Not only did they defeat their militia, but they also managed to defeat Praetorian forces. These victories led more slaves to join Spartacus, eventually increasing their numbers to about 90,000. Spartacus initially hoped to fight his way northward across the Alps so that the escaped slaves could return to their homelands. However, as they had gotten a taste of freedom, many of them refused. Instead, they directed their efforts into the heartland of Italy. Unfortunately, they met their match. The Senate dispatched Marcus Crassus, whose 8 legions smashed Spartacus's forces. First, Spartacus's Gallic and German forces fell. Eventually, he too was defeated during the Battle of the Salarius River. He was reported to have died, but his body was never found. Perhaps even now he is rebelling in the afterlife. In the aftermath, 6,000 more prisoners were captured and crucified by Crassus. Spartacus's aims were unclear. Though he was supposedly a humane commander, his rebellion itself left much of the Roman countryside in ruins. However, the rebellion had long-lasting effects. Roman slave owners began treating their slaves better, and it also indirectly contributed to the betterment of slave laws as a whole. Number 6. Edward Teach, Blackbeard. There is perhaps no outlaw whose name strikes fear quite as much as Blackbeard. Arguably the most iconic pirate of all time, he would have made a killing selling his face on mugs and wall posters. Even today, his likeness is everywhere, in movies, video games, and other forms of mass media. Born as Edward Teach, most of his early life is shrouded in mystery, but he was likely active during the War of Spanish Succession, wherein he attacked Spanish ships for the British as a privateer. Blackbeard first made a name for himself in the year 1716, under the command of another pirate, Captain Horngold. It was during this time that Blackbeard crossed paths with Stede Bonnet, the so-called gentleman pirate. Shortly after, Blackbeard converted a captured French frigate, the Concorde, into the Queen Anne's Revenge. He made it his new flagship and equipped it with 40 guns and crewed it with over 300 men. From here on, he became a pirate in his own right, gathering several more ships and sloops and wreaking havoc across the Caribbean. The coasts of Virginia and Carolina were especially hit hard. Blackbeard's fearsome reputation was born from his appearance. His long, unkempt beard was said to have been tied with lit fuses. If a tall man with firecrackers in his beard was running at you with a sword and a gun in hand, you'd probably want to surrender as well. At the height of Blackbeard's power in 1718, he managed to blockade the city of Charlestown, South Carolina, to demand medicine and other supplies for his crew. However, later that same year, Blackbeard took a royal pardon. He ran the Queen Anne's Revenge aground and transferred to the smaller sloop, the Adventure. For a time, Blackbeard settled in Bath, North Carolina. God knows he needed one.
Yar, it's time to live that peaceful life I've heard so much about. Yeah, ta-ta-ta-tee, ta-ta-ta-doo, ooh, ta-ta-ta. Ah, oh. This sucks. I'm heading out and going back to piracy. I'll see you at 6, dear.
In a matter of months, Blackbeard was back to his old ways. He took his ship, the Adventure, and captured 2 other ships and resumed operations at Delaware Bay. He also spent some time partying at his favorite Ocracoke Island alongside other big names like Israel Hands, Robert Deal, Charles Vane, and Calico Jack. Eventually, the local authorities had had enough. Due to the actions of North Virginia Governor Alexander Spotswood, Lieutenant Robert Maynard was dispatched with 2 sloops to hunt Blackbeard down. Maynard, commanding some 60 men split between 2 sloops, cornered Blackbeard at Ocracoke Bay. Blackbeard was so busy partying with his men that he did not notice the enemy bearing down on them. Maynard's ships fired upon Blackbeard's ships and prevented them from sailing out into open waters. However, Blackbeard brought the Adventure's guns upon them, killing as many as a third of Maynard's men in one fell swoop. Blackbeard, perhaps overconfident that he had already won, was caught in an ambush when he boarded one of the ships. Maynard and his men were still hiding below deck. In the ensuing melee, Maynard clashed with Blackbeard, exchanging gunfire and sword strikes. However, as they were outnumbered and surprised by the attack, Blackbeard and his crew were eventually pushed back. Blackbeard was killed in battle. When Maynard inspected his body, he found that he had been shot 5 times and cut open by over 20 sword strikes. Blackbeard was beheaded and his head was displayed on Maynard's sloop.